Hello friends, welcome to the series classes that is certified in information risk and information system control. Friends, today we'll start with domain 2 part 4 IT risk assessment. In this we'll cover the following topics. The first will be the big data and its challenges. Second in the list will be the gap analysis. We'll have a look on the vulnerability assessment. Fourth in the list is the penetration testing, and at last we'll have the root cause analysis. Right? Let's start with the first topic, that is big data and its challenges. Friends, we all know that the big data analytics is the process of collecting and examining with analyzing large amount of data to discover the market trends, insights and pattern that can help companies make better business decisions. This information is quickly available and efficiently so that companies can be agile in crafting plans to maintain their competitive advantage. Friends, over the past several years, big data has emerged as one of the top strategic technology priorities for organizations. The concept of leveraging large data sets and analytics to drive business value is not new. Let's take an example. Just take an example of a data warehousing has been around for the several decades along with the associated technologies and techniques such as relational database management system, business intelligence reporting system, online analytical processing and data mining. Friends, big data is commonly described using the 3V model such as volume, velocity and variety. Friends, let's discuss one by one. Friends, in volume, it refers to the bigness of the data. Typically, big data refer to the data sets that are vastly larger than traditional data repositories, perhaps beyond the capacity of traditional database software to store and process. However, big data is a subjective term. There is no defined threshold to qualify data as big. At the high end of the spectrum, just take an example like a Walmart is building a data analytics hub called Data Cafe, which will contain 40 petabytes of transactional data. Right? Coming to the velocity, velocity referred to the speed at which the data are generated and or changed. Right? Big data is continuously generated and changed often in the real time as exposed to a traditional approach to loading data via extract, transform, and load batch jobs. For example, according to the Forbes magazine, Facebook, that is 1.2 billion users, update their status on an average of 293,000 times per minute. Right? Similarly, variety. Variety refer to the multiple source and data types that may be employed in a big data solution. Right? Data may come from internal system, customer oblique consumer and a third party. Additionally, data may be a mix of structured and unstructured data. Right? Structured data usually conform to a defined data model, whereas unstructured data might be in the form of raw text, images, or perhaps even audio or video files. For instances, Black Knight, right, has a big data solution for a mortgage industry called a Loan Sphere Data Hub, which combines data from multiple sources, including internal mainframe and client server based transaction processing system, and industry data that come from flat files and public records. Right? So these data are often in the form of scanned document image. Understood? Let's have a more overview. Friends, in big data is the advance in the structure in the capability to perform analysis of structured and unstructured data to help make the business decision and increase the competitive advantage. Right? Risk can be incurred either through adoption or non-adoption of these capabilities. Changes in the analytics capabilities can introduce the technical and operational risk. Weigh benefit of leveraging big data against the enterprise maturity, governance, and management of data. Right? Friends, this change in the analytics capability dealing with the big data can introduce the technical and operational risk. An organization should understand that risk can be incurred either through adoption or non adoption of these capabilities. As per the ISACA guidance, technical and operational risk should consider that certain data elements may be governed by regulatory or contractual requirement, and that data element may need to be centralized in one place so that data can be analyzed. In some cases, this centralization can compound technical risk. Moving on to the big data challenges. Friends, some of the challenges enterprises commonly face associated with the big data include the following. The first, data ownership. Friends, data ownership is often not clearly defined due to misconception that data management is technical work and therefore responsibility of the IT department. Similarly, marketing or the other department can obtain the data needed by their business units without considering the cost or risk associated with using the data. Third on the list is evolving regulatory requirement impact data governance. Friends, the number of data related regulation is trending upward, right? Example, California Consumer Privacy Act or General Data Protection Regulation on privacy protection and China cybersecurity law on data localization. The lack of a clear data governance structure make it harder to respond to emerging or changing international data laws. Right? Enterprise often identify a need, right, for workflow changes, which has an impact on enterprise architecture. Opportunities to standardize, interoperate, and re-architect current processes and system must be taken. Proper change management, data protection, and executive sponsorship are necessary to make data governance a reality, particularly in heavily regulated environment. Right? Similarly, siloed departmental and organizational structures result in the disaggregated data sets and data analytics challenges. Next, data deluge. Friends, as the name suggests, data deluge can result in the quality problem. Big data is of no value if it cannot be harnessed for better business decision making, right? Effective decision cannot be made based on the poor quality data. In addition, more complex and unstructured data are being introduced which can strain the data governance effort, right? And at last, lack of skilled staff to conduct the data analysis creates a barrier to effective data governance. A good working knowledge of data analytics becomes critical to the success of an enterprise. The best resource should be able to identify hidden patterns and unknown correlations, draw conclusions, and make inferences and predict future trends. Right? Moving to the next, that is let's understand about the gap analysis. Friends, a gap analysis is the method, right, of assessing the performance of a business unit to determine whether business requirement or objectives are being met, and if not, what steps should be taken to meet them. Friends, by documenting the desired state of condition of the risk that management want to reach and then carefully analyzing and evaluating the current condition of the organization, the risk practitioner can identify the existence of the risk gap and scope of action that may be needed to close the gap. Friends, gap analysis can be used in iteration to devise deliverables, project, and milestone. Similarly, using the gap analysis method to plan the projects along with milestone can help the organization initiate and execute projects in an orderly and logical manner that considers their dependencies among each other. To measure the state, the risk practitioner may find it beneficial to identify one or more key indicators that relate to goal or performance, right? Or key performance indicators which may be internal to the organization to relate to identify standard, framework, or good practices, right? A gap analysis is based on the comparison of current state or condition and the desired state of condition, with the difference between the two states being a gap. Moving on to the next, that is vulnerability assessment. Friends, vulnerability assessment is the process of identifying and classifying the vulnerabilities, provides a careful examination of a target environment to discover any potential point of compromise or weaknesses. In the list, we have the several other vulnerability assessment. Let's take an example such as network vulnerability, disruption of utility, untrained personnel, poor physical asset controls, poorly built web-facing services, inefficient processes, insecure applications, unreliable supply chain, old or poorly maintained equipment. Friends, let's talk about the penetration testing, right? Penetration testing use the same sort of tools as those used by a real adversary. Secondly, it may be conducted by either internal or external team or hybrid, and rules vary from a full knowledge of the environment to zero knowledge test in which testing team has no knowledge of the environment being attacked. The scope, time, constraint and target, exclusion and implicit authority to carry out these activities need to be clearly defined prior to having a penetration test. And at last, that the goal of a penetration test is not to identify every potential exploitable vulnerability, but rather to discover and document how an adversary might leverage the current state of environment in order to be able to accomplish their mission. Friends, since we have discussed about the penetration testing and vulnerability analysis, friends, in this vulnerability assessment, that is a lack of adequate control, indicates the vulnerability, right? Vulnerability can be exposed by a threat which result in the risk of confidentiality, integrity and availability, right? Similarly, we can say that the vulnerability assessment is the process of identifying weaknesses in the system or processes. It can be carried out by either by the manual processes or automated tools, right? Automated tools have the ability to analyze large amount of data and run multiple tests and identify the weaknesses. A manual test will give the better result when content is not easily quantifiable and requires judgment. Similarly, to validate the result of a vulnerability assessment, the organization may conduct a penetration test, right? The expert penetration testing team uses the same tool and technique as used by a real hacker. It is advisable to conduct the penetration after major infrastructure changes are made. Findings of vulnerability assessment or penetration testing should be used by the risk practitioner to bridge the gap. Friends, vulnerability assessment may be manual or automated as we have discussed. Since automated tools have the ability to filter the large amount of data and can be used to examine logs, compile and analyze data from multiple sources, right? Example, security incident and event management tool, which examines the function of a program and run test files or data against a tool such as firewall or application, where content is not easily quantified and requires judgment, which includes review of the business processes, physical security, and source code. A manual test is better, right? Friends, vulnerability assessment may contain data that are not accurate, such as false positive, that indicate a vulnerability where none exist. It is important to ensure qualified staffs are executing and interpreting results from the automated tools, right? Similarly, vulnerability assessment may also miss the identification of vulnerabilities that require a sequence of chained technique to exploit, right? Similarly, friends, penetration testing, as we have discussed, let's have an overview once again. Friends, penetration testing can use the same sort of tools as those used by the real adversary, right? Which can help to establish the extent which can be identified vulnerability is a true weaknesses. There are different type of penetration tests that can be performed are based upon the enterprise appetite and the end goals, which should dictate the approach that is employed in carrying out a penetration test. Penetration test may be conducted by either internal or external team or hybrid, and rules vary from full knowledge of the environment to zero knowledge test in which testing team has no knowledge of the environment being attacked. An expert penetration testing team will be creative and attempt several type of tests to achieve their goal. They may have exploit multiple vulnerable attack vectors or only one that gain them access. Friends, vulnerability assessment tend to be non-intrusive in nature in that they will profile the system and attempt to elicit information to determine if the system is vulnerable to an attack. There are typically two types of technical vulnerability assessment: credentials and non-credentialed. Credentialed assessment will significantly reduce the number of potential false positives that require elevated permission to run in order to understand the specific system configurations. Friends, non-credential assessment will contain a much higher number of potential false positives as they are unable to confirm the specific configurations and patch level applied to the system. Right? Friends, the purpose of penetration test is to simulate an adversary, including intrusive methods, in an attempt to circumvent control and exploit potential vulnerabilities within an organization in order to action on objectives. The objectives are normally defined in advance of the testing and clearly stated. Example, get to the system, exfiltrate this information, or compromise this individual. The goal of penetration test is not to identify every potential exploitable vulnerability, but rather to discover and document how an adversary might leverage the current state of environment in order to be able to accomplish their mission. Coming to the next, friends, let's discuss about the root cause analysis. Friends, root cause analysis is a process of diagnosis to establish the origin of event so that lesson can be learned from the consequences. The actions that an enterprise takes in response to risk are often based on the lesson learned from the previous event. A prudent risk practitioner examines the root cause of an incident to discover the condition and factor that led to the event rather than reacting to the symptoms of the problem. The underlying condition which comprise the root of the problem are the conditions against which actions must be taken in order to prevent the problem from recurring. For example, if a review of the business process finds that the user are not compliant with the procedure and policies in place, the risk practitioner should examine why the user are not compliant before recommending enforcement of the procedure. It may be that the procedure is outdated, flawed, or workable when aligned with the objectives of enterprise, in which case it is the procedure and not the behavior that should be corrected. In many cases, a risk event may be the result of coinciding events, several issues that act in the combination to create what appears to be the single result. Friends, The risk practitioner can use root cause analysis as a means of identifying coinciding events which cannot be traced to a common cause. Right? In this case, the solution is more than just a single response activity or implementation of a single control. Friends, hope you have understood. Here we comes to the end of today's class. Thank you for being with us. It's all presented by Let's Learn Crisc. Stay tuned for more updates. And friends, please don't forget to subscribe and hit like button. Thank you.